Bee Colony Health Survey is out, 30 new sawflies in Arkansas, and USDA releases Russian wasps to control emerald ash borer, all on this edition of the Pest Geek Podcast. Pull out your hose and grab your can. We're about to integrate another Pest Geek Podcast. Hi, everybody. Frank Hernandez here, and welcome to the Pest Geek Podcast, bringing you the latest information on pests, products, and politics from today's leading industry sources to help you start, manage, and grow your pest control business. Hey, welcome back to another edition of the Pest Geek Podcast. I am your host, Frank Hernandez, here every week. We're discussing all things pest today. We're going to be talking about the new survey that was just released, I believe, about a week ago, and discussing the death of beehive colonies across the country and the exaggerated claims made by some. Some things are just out of control in this business, guys, and people are just reporting all kinds of things. But I think we need to take a look at what these studies mean, how they're interpreted, and let's look at the raw data and what's available to us. But, before I do that, I want to hope, first of all, I hope you had a wonderful weekend. We had a wonderful weekend here. We just relaxed, spent a lot of time with the family. I worked a lot this week. We put in some serious hours. Working until late at night and being out there early in the day. And so we just spent some time together this weekend, relaxing with the family and enjoying ourselves. I hope you just did the same. You relaxed and recoup and be back today to this week to get it started all over again. Just kicking it out there. I want to thank Charles Osborne. He's the owner-operator, entomologist at Osborne Pest Management Limited in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Thank you for following us on Facebook. We thank all of our followers because we know that because of you listening, because of you following, because of you sharing the stuff that we are putting out, and you find it worthwhile to like it, that is the success of this show. So we thank you. The Grounds Guys also at Grounds Guys California is following us on Twitter. So we thank you for that too. We also got some followers on LinkedIn, and we thank those who are following us on Google Plus. Thank you for that too. Also, our podcast, whether you're listening to us on iTunes, we're just on about every app that there is to be heard on, whether it's on Android devices. There's about 5 podcast apps, and we also, Google came out with a new Google Podcast player in their music, and that's available. So we're seeing some people listening to us on that. We're just thankful for the way this podcast is going, that more and more people are listening, more and more people are liking it every day. It astonishes me really every week that how many people are tuning in to listen to what I have to say. And I hope that it's helping you be a better pest control person, be a better landscaper, be a better, whatever area that you find yourself in, that you're using or dealing with pests, that it's helping you, grow. And, if you've got, customers that are happy, you want to get good reviews, and you want to get as many as reviews as you can. And the best way to get reviews is simply by asking for them. Now, after you've gotten your Google page up, it's been verified, they sent you the code in the mail, and you're Google verified that you are a real business in a real location, then you got a review section there that you can ask for reviews, and people can give you reviews. And the best way to do it is just to find the customer that is simply happy and say, hey, will you give us a review, and send them the link. You can either text it to them or email it, but by asking for those reviews, you will find you get more of them than if you didn't ask for them. We've gotten a lot of reviews from people we didn't ask for, but we do get a lot because we do ask for them. And I think it's important to get those reviews and get yourself noticed. So take the time, ask for the reviews, just like asking for referrals. It's vitally important. In the book of the week, this is a great little book. It's called The 4 Disciplines of Execution, Achieving Your Wildly Important Goals by Sean Covey. And the issue with most people is not, and most businesses, is not that they don't have good ideas. And not that they don't have a lack of ideas. Most of them have good ideas and lots of ideas and things they would like to do. but they just don't execute. And execution is really where it's at. I mean, you can talk a good game, you can have all the ideas in the world, and until you actually get out there and do them, you will not see the rewards for that. So executing, deciding on what to execute, where to invest your time, where to invest your energy. I think that's the secret to getting things done. So it's a great book. You can get it free trial by going to audibletrial.com/pestgeek. Use our code and our link, and you can get that book for free if you are not an Audible listener. And I thank you for all the people listening to all the Audible books that we're recommending. This is one of those books that's been very, very, because in the past I get a lot of ideas, but I just don't always get things done. And I have to learn to prioritize which is going to be the most important, which has the most rewards, and getting those ideas and getting those things done. And that's what I've done. And that's why I'm seeing the results I'm seeing. And we're able to do this podcast. We're able to do a lot of the things that most people say, well, it just can't be done. And it's about really, 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 really prioritizing those things and doing them. So I hope you guys have the same success. A little bit of a pest alert news. The 30 new species of sawfly found in Arkansas. Now, I'm going to butcher this doctor's name, but, I wish doctors would have very easy names like Smith, Brown, and Hernandez. They were easy for me to pronounce. But Dr. Michael Skvarla discovered or collected 47 species, 30 of which have not been found in Arkansas before. And you can get the study that he did is a PhD work, and it's terrestrial arthropods of Steel Creek, Buffalo National River, Arkansas, sawflies, and under the insecta Hemiptera. There's a link to it, and you can check out that study if you're in Arkansas and you're interested about sawflies and how they will affect your plants and for agriculture. Check that out. Very important. Also, a new USDA will release the Russian wasps to control emerald ash borers. The study called in the study Reproductive and Development Biology of the Emerald Ash Borer Parasitoid, and it gives the long name of this species, but it's a very important thing, because this is it's taken like half of the eastern seaboard is being eaten away by emerald ash borer, and all the way from the northeast down to Atlanta to Georgia, and so very important, and they're releasing this insect that is a beneficial insect, and it's a parasitic wasp, and so don't go spraying all the forests because you'll kill all these wasps off, and they're very, very beneficial to try to get this under control. There was a study released this just last week where it states that more than 40% of beehives died in the past year. And when you read something like this in the paper, whether it's a headline in a major newspaper like U.S. News, which is where this appeared, and in many other newspapers and in blogs around the country, and in high domain blogs, like the ones they're appearing in, it gives the impression to the reader that all of a sudden, 40% of all the beehives in the country collapsed. There's only 60% of them left. And people who do not deal in biology or chemistry or don't understand agriculture and don't understand what, raising bees and caring for bees is like, will just assume that that's it. We only have 60% left. And if we don't do something about it, pretty soon we just won't have any. And the whole food industry is going to collapse. Now, if we saw a collapse of 40% of bees overnight, the whole industry probably would collapse. And we're talking about beehives that are cared for by beekeepers, not wild hives, not wild bee populations in forests and in other parts of the country. We're just talking about beehives. Now, The study, it's not really a study. It's a survey that has been sent out for I think 10 years now, and they're covering what are known as the winter losses. How many beehives die during the winter? And there's multiple reasons why beehives die during the winter. I mean, poor nutrition. It could be diseases. And it's the thought is it's always being blamed on the neonics. I mean, you read a blog and a report comes like this and nobody ever sees the raw data. Okay. What they see is the commentary. What they see is what somebody said about the survey. And the problem with data and information and analysis is that the data can be spun any way you want it to be spun. If the person who's writing it has an agenda, then he spins that towards his agenda. It all depends why that article was written and the way it was written. And most people never see the raw data because the raw data is, quite frankly, very boring to look at a lot of, a statistical analysis. So it's always, whatever falls on the first page of Google is what's read. And if this real information is on the second page of Google, well, it just gets buried there because nobody goes. Nobody's going to read through 10 pages, 10 articles. Once they read the first 3, they say, okay, I got the idea. They all say the same thing. The problem is they were all pretty much regurgitated one after the other. And that's the problem that we're having in the age of information, that people don't actually read much data, much information. They want everything chewed for them. And it becomes a real danger. But what does the actual survey show? Well, according to the beinformed.org, which is a cooperation of with the USDA and the Agriculture Department, they're working on a lot of studies, and they're doing some good research on hives that have found infections and things like that. And they're getting studies of finding out where these are and what's happened to them. And they're getting more and more. But the survey, mostly done by the USDA, and a lot of the information, when you say 44%, it is not that it's 44% nationwide. No, 44% of the hives did not collapse. 44% of the ones that reported in on the survey, when you add them all together, they show a 44% collapse. So when I started looking at this, I immediately, questions just start popping into my head. Well, how many people participated? Well, it was more than 5,700 beekeepers from 48 states, which is about, collectively, they managed 389,083 colonies in 2015. This amounts to about only 15% of the total beehives in the country. Okay, so so it's really not it's not a view of the entire industry. It's only 15% of the beekeepers. My question is it always the same beekeepers that are reporting for the last 10 years, or are they changing all the time, and what are they getting? Second is, well, what do you classify as a beekeeper? They have 3 different classifications. One, the bee-informed classification of a backyard beekeeper, one that has less than 50 colonies. A sideline beekeeper is one between 50 and 500. And a commercial beekeeper is one that has more than 500 colonies on their property. Now, it doesn't address, the data that I didn't see doesn't address the issue whether these were stationary, whether they were migratory. How many of these are in the north? How many of these are in the south? How many are in the Midwest? So if the larger group that reported were all in the Northeast, well, that would explain a lot of things. But we don't know. So there's too many unanswered questions on this study that, out of the 2.66 million managed beehive colonies in the country, it's only 15% of what they got back. the one in their comment in this report, it says it's a clear culprit of the collapse is Varroa mite. The Varroa mite is a challenging problem among backyard beekeepers. That's one of their definition. Defining of those who manage fewer than 50 colonies. Many backyard beekeepers don't have a Varroa control strategy in place. So what they're finding out is, based on this, is that, hey, the Varroa mite is the big problem here, and most of these guys that are in that classification don't have a strategy how they're going to deal with it. So you're getting more deaths because either they don't know how to deal with it, or they just simply are not, concerned about it. I mean, if you were really concerned about something that's happening and you had to control those Varroa mites, do you have a strategy to control them? Then there's argument among people in the bee industry, whether you are do you apply those chemicals to control them, or do you treat treatment-free beekeepers, or are you treatment-pro beekeeper? And, some say that we have no problems absolutely with Varroa mites. We have, our decline, our death, our disorder is less than the 15%, which is the natural average. And, we're less than that. We've had none of this problems. And then people who are in the pro treatment of beekeepers treating for Varroa mites are saying our colonies are collapsing. And so, the other thing is there's no indication of, in the survey of, well, what kind of diet are these being fed? Are they artificial diets? Is it because of poor nutrition that this is happening? Is it soil pollen that they're being fed? What's the sugar sources that they're feeding them? So, overall care of these hives, like, is it, are you spending the money to really feed them top quality product, or are you going with cheaper products to feed it? And that could be the cause of the collapse. What are the stressors? We don't know. The study doesn't reveal that. Since we don't know, one of the other problems with the study, that, is interpreting and understanding the difference between colony loss numbers from national surveys. So these are a collection of surveys that are done, and you get all kinds of different numbers. Were these migratory? Do we really know? The USDA has a different classification for a beekeeper than they are. There's a backyard is 50 or less. The USDA is either whether you have 5 or less colonies or 5 or more colonies. And the data is collected on the 5 or more, and then the data is collected separately on the 5 or less. So those are issues that you have to contend with in these kind of studies, and then see what it is that's being interpreted. Now, based on what I've seen from the USDA, we're going to go and look at purely USDA data now, not from blogs or from, the people over at Be Informed, which are publishing information. Kind of like the same thing. They're doing their own research and their own thing, but they're taking data and publishing, and then, kind of working in conjunction with, but not using the data that the USDA has completely. So in December 23rd of 2015, the Department of Agriculture, the National Agricultural Statistics Service, NASS, was reaching out to beekeepers in December of 2015 and in January of 2015 to gather information on numbers on the health of bee colonies. Okay, and they're getting the reports based on what they're targeting, that about 40% of the bee colonies were collapsing. So then I say, okay, well, I'm sure that the USDA has been keeping track of, how many hives are out there, because every state reports in. So if every state reports in, now the guys over at Be Informed are not using this data. They're going after their own, the way they said, and here's what they've said on how they collected the data for their survey. All right, it's totally different. And here it is. I'll read this to you. Let's see here. Here we go. As the Bee Informed Partnership, BIP, does not possess a list of registered beekeepers in the U.S., we performed a sample of convenience, trying to reach a maximum number of beekeepers through different means, bee journals, internet, paper survey, and inviting participants to forward the invitation to their peers. The only requirement to be part of the BIP survey was that the colonies located at least in U.S. state or territory. So, what state were they in? So if all of a sudden the only people who participated were in the Northeast, well, that would explain a lot why you have, more deaths. Certain states have, and we're going to look at the data where it's really drastic in some states, have really drastic deaths, while others have just like in the single digits. They're not even, some of them are in 1 to 4%, while others are 18 to 20%. Some even more. Some are in the high 40s. So it's not really a nationwide catastrophe. It's only in certain areas. And I'd be asking, why are they only in that area? So they released, and they released this article stating what they intended to do. And then now in May 12th of 2016, they released the data of what they studied. But the problem is there is no raw data in the report. Not like you get on other reports where you get, here's how many people and here's how big the colonies were and here's what region and, here's where it was. No, we're not getting any of that right now off this raw data. But there are a couple of things that are worth mentioning. Number one is that they were 8% fewer honeybee colonies January 1st of 2016 than the 2.82 million in the present year. So there's an 8% less. But when you look at why they were 8% less, it isn't because 8% more died, it's because they were not replaced. When we look at the data, that's what we understand, that these colonies were simply not replaced. When these colonies die, what people need to understand is that the beekeeper replaces that beehive and starts a new one. And he also reconditions old hives. And that's part of the game that you have to play with. You're going to have a certain percentage that are naturally going to die from one problem or another. And it has been happening forever, and it will continue to happen forever. They're not in the wild. You're raising, you're caring for these bees, and they have diseases, they have nutritional problems, they have mites, and all these issues have to be dealt with. And just like in pest control, I see homes that the pest control technician is doing an awesome job of keeping those pests out and not allowing infestations to happen. And in other cases, the infestations are there. They just keep covering up with pesticide, doing more baseboard sprays. And it's the same thing in bees. It's going to be, sometimes it's environmental stress with plants, like we deal with plants in the landscape, where it's environmental stress. It's strictly hot. We're in 100-degree temperatures. These plants are stressed out. You can't water more than twice a week, and the landscaper is stressing them out because of improper pruning and trimming. We see it all the time. The difference between a great-looking landscape and a bad-looking landscape, usually it's the care of the caretaker. So a lot of those things have to be considered. And the expertise and the experience of the beekeepers have to be considered. So now what you're seeing is there was an 18% loss of colonies in January through March in the quarter of 2015, and then a 17% loss in the same quarter of 2016. So we're talking that if you look at the numbers from last year, there's actually less bees dying by 1% of those colonies. And that's what we're looking at, is saying, where are we getting that 44%? Well, if you take the numbers that they were given and then you add them in summer and for summer and in winter, you add those two numbers together and you get that 44%. So if you had 24% losses in the winter and 24%, you're at 48% for that area. And that's how they kind of came up with those numbers. But when we look now, and we're looking at USDA, just pure USDA data, March 22nd, let's move forward to 2016, the National Agricultural Statistics, NASS, board releases the state of the industry kind of deal of what's been happening with honey. And there's also the one released where they're going to be talking about the industry. And the first page that you come to with statistics numbers, there's a state, and it starts from Alabama, and the numbers go all the way down through Wyoming. And then they have other states, and then they have the total for the U.S. Well, when you look at the maximum number of colonies, maximum lost, percentage lost, added, renovated, and percent renovated with 5 or more colonies in the U.S. This is USDA, January 1st of 2015 and January and March of 2015, you get a national average of 18%. Now, the goal of the USDA is to get to 15% of winter losses. So they're about 3% really from their goal. I mean, the problem is about a 3% more than they would like. It's not 40 in the winter. It's right now that you look at, it's 18%. But when you ask how many colonies were lost in Alabama? Well, Alabama has 7,000 colonies from beekeepers, right? And they lost 1,800. They lost 26%, but they added 2,800 colonies. So the beekeepers went in after and added more colonies than they had lost. They got 250 colonies that were renovated altogether. So they lost 1,800, but they added 20. So they added 1,000 more colonies than they had previous. Why would they do this? Well, it all depends on their production. I mean, they know their business, so they say, well, we're expecting a bigger demand this year. We're just going to add more hives. Do you see that? In a place like Idaho, where there's, compared to Alabama, there's 81,000 hives. Their maximum that they've had is 88,000. They lost 3,700 colonies. They only lost 4%. They only replaced 2,600. Okay? And they renovated 8,000 hives. Obviously, they were in disrepair and they needed to renovate these. So, from one state to another, you can see the drastic change in what's needed, what's done, what they decided to do. So, how many did they lose? They only lost 4%. Well, if you go to a place like Illinois that only had 6,000 hives, and they've had a maximum of 10,005, and they lost 4,200 hives in Illinois during that same time, that was a 40% loss. And they, out of the 4,200, they only added 2,300. So they replaced less than half. So what will happen next year? Well, if you had a 40% loss this year, you didn't replace the 40%, you only replaced it about 50%, and next year you have a loss, well, you're going to be in a lot worse shape than you were this year. Do you see how this game works? So when now next year they come and they say, well, we lost 50% of our hives. Well, we had much less to begin with than we did in the beginning. If you're looking at who has the most hives, California alone has 1,440,000 hives. They have half of the 2,800,000 hives in the U.S. are in California alone. California only lost 15%, which is the acceptable, which is what the USDA is trying to get to during that same period of time. They've had a maximum of 1,069,000. They've lost 255,000. They replaced 250,000. So they were only 5,000 shy from where they were back. And they renovated 124,000 of those hives. California is spot on where the USDA wants to be nationwide. When you look at the overall number of the 2,000,008, how many beehives were lost altogether. They lost 500,000 hives. But altogether, guess what? The industry replaced 546,000 hives. 5,046,980. So they actually had, at the beginning of the year when they started, they actually had 46,000 more hives that they had replaced. And, 270,000 were renovated. So, when you look at numbers like that, it makes me wonder, well, geez, where are these problems happening? They don't tell us. And that's the problem. In the honey report, here's the thing. United States honey production, this is on another report. I got links to all this. Down 12% for operations with 5 or more colonies. Then operations with less than 5 colonies produce 720,000 pounds of honey in 2015. All right. Now, honey prices are down 4% for operations with 5 or more colonies. And then you have the list here of all the honey that is produced per state. When you look at, well, why is the production down and the price down? Well, typically, if you know anything about farming and production and manufacturing, is if the production goes down, usually prices increase because you have an increase in demand. So we don't have a shortage of honey production in the country. Prices went down when they should have gone up. And I think that the people who did not replace colonies or doing certain things are saying, hey, we know the price is going to go down because we have, kind of like the stock market, you can see when the National Honey Report comes out and you can say, well, this type of honey and that type of honey and buckwheat honey and wildflower honey and, clover honey, what are the prices? And if I'm producing this type of honey and the price is going down, well, I just won't produce that kind of honey or that amount. Because typically, again, if you lowered the production and the production of honey would have gone down through colony collapse disorder, you would have seen a spike in the price and people would be making more money because there is more demand and less product. And that clearly isn't the case. So I think that when these studies come out and things come out, we really, really need to look at the data and interpret the data and say what's happening. Because the goal, if you look at the report, their goal is to say, hey, we want to get to 15% of colonies collapsing within 10 years, with no more than 50% of colonies collapsing within 10 years. Folks, I hope this helps you to be able to deal with people that are constantly blaming you for the reason why this is happening and that because of your spraying, because of what you're doing, colony collapse disorder, because of neonicotinoids, that you're able to give them a link and say, look at the data, look at the information. How bad is it? Well, it's a concern, but is it happening everywhere and why is it happening? And the question that we have is nobody can answer that. That's the problem, that nobody can answer why this is happening in a lot of areas. And is it that more people are getting into this, not knowing what they're doing, and we're seeing an increase? And then, my colonies are collapsing. I don't know what's going on. Find out, please. And nobody seems to know yet. Now, there's a lot of good studies going on this website on diseases and the research they're doing on diseases. And they're very targeted. They're very regional, and they're starting to put a lot of more data is coming out, and it mostly seems to be disease problems, not neonicotinoids. There's not a whole lot of talk on this site about neonicotinoids and chemical sprays. So I hope that does help you. Folks, until next time, hey, you have a great one.
Thank you for listening to the Pest Geek Podcast. If you have enjoyed the Pest Geek Podcast, please give us a rating, write a review, or subscribe to the channel. You can join the Pest Geek Society by visiting pestgeekpodcast.com. Thank you for listening. See you next time.